When you give me Bounty Hunter as a possible player background, as well as Radiant bounty missions, and not to mention the several Mandalorian armor mods on the Nexus already, you had to know this build was coming. Today, we're tackling the Razor Crest from Star Wars The Mandalorian, and making my best approximation of it in Starfield, while still making a functional and usable ship for combat and more. For this video, there are no mods, no build glitches, no console commands used, making it so that anyone with a base copy of Starfield can follow along. And everyone's gonna have a different interpretation of the Razor Crest. If there's parts of my build that you're not a fan of, that's totally fine. And I hope that you're able to take your own spin on this design. There's already several versions that I've seen online, and there's things that I don't even think are perfect about mine either. I tried to find an okay mix of matching the show's version of the Razor Crest interior and exterior for this build, especially given that I spend most of my time looking at the ship's interior anyway. Compared to my previous Ebon build, this ship will have more decks, less crew slots and cargo, but will serve as a viable ship for a bounty hunter. If anything, I think the Ebon was a bit easier to remake by comparison, given that it was a bit larger and wider, making it easier to hide stuff like cargo modules, reactors, and more. The Razor Crest is a gunship, and minus the engines is only one habitat wide, making for a slight challenge in its construction. I do make use of some of the same parts that I did in my Ebon guide, including the same engines, reactor, and shields. This is a Class B ship, and I had considered making it a Class C, but hiding a Class C reactor in this build would have been a huge pain in the ass. Like my previous video, the vast majority of the building will be done at my outpost, using a landing pad with a shipbuilder. Before we go there, however, we're going to start off at the Tayo Engineering Showroom in the Neon Core, where I'll be buying the Tayo Pinpoint 4G landing gear. I'm just throwing this onto the ship that I'll be building off of. Once again, using the UC prison ship from the Crimson Fleet questline, but any ship that you don't want to keep will do. With our awkwardly placed Tayo lander in place, we'll return to our home base where we can continue the construction all the way through to completion. Like my previous build, I opted for Hope Tech habitats, as the Razor Crest has darker interiors, but Tayo might work slightly better for some of its exterior design. To get started, we'll go ahead and delete everything except for the one Tayo lander, obviously. In front of the lander, we'll be adding the Sextant 10ST hauler shielded cargo, not even because I want to use the ship for smuggling, but because it fits really well for the ship's design. Behind the landing gear, we're adding on a HopeTech 2x1 workshop, so that we'll have access to most of the crafting stations from the comfort of our own ship. And behind that, the Tayo Shipbed 200 landing pad. That way we'll have direct access to the workshop hab. On either side of the hab and loading bay, we'll be adding two HopeTech landing gears, one fore and one mid. Directly on top of our Tayo lander, we'll be placing our reactor, the 102DS mag from Dogstar, and in front of that, on top of our cargo hold, we're just making use of a Deimos Hull A structural piece. Above our HopeTech workshop on the bottom level, we'll be adding a 2x1 HopeTech armory, so that you can show off your weapons and pretend that you'd use the brig for captured bounties. That was really a missed opportunity, Bethesda. On top of this, we're adding a 1x1 HopeTech storeroom and a 2x1 captain's quarters. The way that this is built allows for a single ladder that goes from the bottom to top decks for more convenient traversal. In front of the captain's quarters goes our cockpit. The Armstrong cockpit that I initially used doesn't really conform with the ship's exterior, especially compared to the original from the show. Other options that we can use here are the Tayo Samurai cockpits or even a Stroud Eklund one, but the Stroud Eklund Viking would require glitching the piece below it. I decided to start off with the Armstrong cockpit for a bit before ultimately deciding on the Samurai for its conformity with the rest of the ship's outline. On the second deck, just behind our armory, we'll be placing the Aurora 13G grav drive, a Deimos Hull A piece on top, and a Deimos belly aft right behind that. And to finish off defining the shape of the ship's main body, we're adding 4 Deimos wings, to help form that sort of diamond shape that you can see from up above. In the gap between the Deimos wings on either side, we'll fill this with another Deimos Hull A, from which we'll build out our engine blocks. Immediately under these, we'll be hiding a Dagama 1010 shielded cargo hold, since these are really the only ones that fit in this space. Connected to the Deimos Hull A, we'll attach a Tayo midcap port bottom and port top, as well as a Tayo port nose cap in front of these two. For the engine, we're going with a Nova 1020. The Supernova engine would work best for the aesthetic, but being a Class C engine would mean having to find a way to hide a Class C reactor in the build, and that's a puzzle I just didn't really figure out. Attached to the Tayo port top cap, we'll add an M30 Ulysses Helium-3 tank, which works really well to help out with the engine shape. We'll then copy this design on the other side of the ship, leaving us with our two identical engine blocks. On top of our HopeTech storeroom, we'll throw on a Deimos Slim Docker, which this can always be flipped and placed on the underside of our ship, attached to the workshop, as opposed to being attached to the storeroom up top, which is really just there for spacing things out anyway. And behind this, we'll be adding a Warden SG shield generator. To cover up and hide the reactor, we'll be adding 4 Tayo side caps, 2 on each side of the ship. Coloring the Razor Crest is fairly straightforward. On mouse and keyboard, you can double-click to select the entire ship, and then color everything at once. I made the ship a dark gray, and then added yellow accents to the Tayo side caps, the front Deimos wings, and the landers. For weapons, you'll want to attach 2 horizontal weapon mounts to the Deimos hull A piece that sits just beneath the cockpit. This gives us a total of 4 weapon hardpoints, which I used to give the ship 2 ballistic weapons and 2 particle beam weapons. And to give us some extra shipboarding ability, I hid a suppressor under one of the Deimos wings. With the build fully done, including swapping to the Samurai cockpit and placing the Docker on the ship's underbelly, I decided to break the construction down layer by layer, just to help with a little bit more convenience and visualization in regards to seeing how this was built. The ship doesn't have the greatest mobility, or even the greatest damage output, but that's kinda in line with the original. The Razor Crest in The Mandalorian is an old pre-Empire gunship that's been discontinued. It's mediocre at a lot of different things, and not really great at any one thing in particular, so it's kinda like me. You can get a much better mobility using the upgraded version of these engines if you have a higher rank in Starship design. Having rank 3 will get you the best version of these engines, with greater thrust and maneuverability compared to the ones that I'm using at rank 2 of the skill. Having done a few different drafts of the Razor Crest, and having started drafts on a couple other ship designs, I'm definitely finding it much more challenging to build ships like this, where you really only have one central corridor to work with. Wider ships do feel a bit easier to design, especially when it comes to finding room for fuel tanks, reactors, and more. Still, I'm happy with how this turned out, but my personal preferences are definitely leaning towards some wider ships. As always, thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments below what ships you'd like to see me make, and possibly butcher in the process. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.